Hello, my friend. Welcome. I hope you're having an outstanding day. This is Heather. This is, yes, it's the Back to Me podcast, Wellness Your Way, which is super interesting because we're going to talk to Carolyn Cohen, Wellness While Walking.
Woohoo!
Woohoo! How is that for a segue?
That's awesome. Yeah, a couple of wellness podcasters, right?
Right. And I didn't even realize it until I started to introduce you that we're both doing wellness walking, wellness your way. Maybe your way is walking,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
And the first thing that I'm always super curious about is how the heck did you become a wellness while walking podcaster?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a story, but I hope it helps people because it just shows my journey, which was that I was raised by a health nut before her time. I didn't know what a potato was really. I didn't know what bread and butter was. I went to summer camp and I gained like 20 pounds. My parents had to bring me new clothing
Oh my
at
God.
visiting day because I'd outgrown all my clothing because I had discovered white bread and butter, which of course the camp fed us to defray their costs because that's a cheap way of filling up kids. And I loved it. So I had been sort of protected, let's say, from a bunch of things by my mom, who was attempting to keep my dad alive because everyone in his family had died early of heart disease. And so that worked out well for her and for him, but it wasn't so great for me. And I rebelled and I was like, this doesn't matter. All my other friends are perfectly healthy and they're eating, pudding cups and ding dongs and whatever else there was.
Kool-Aid.
Yeah,
I
so
drank
many
so
things that
much Kool-Aid.
I would go to my friend's house and drink, vibrantly colored beverages and all this stuff I never got to have. And so I rebelled. And even when I had my kids, I was really not going to do the same thing. That was my decision that I was really going to let them do whatever. And then sort of two things happened. One is I started not feeling good. And the second thing is they started not feeling that great. And I ended up with a diagnosis of irritable bowel syndrome,
Ooh.
and they were suffering from all kinds of allergies, food allergies, really scary stuff, and skin issues and ADHD and so on. So I had to do something about my own condition because I really couldn't be a parent very well when I was like doubled over in the bathroom all the time. And so I started to make some small changes, and I really quite quickly came around because those small changes I made, I immediately felt better. And I was able to also have an impact on my very young kids at that time. Although they will show me pictures that we have of them standing in front of our old pantry with all the stuff that I stopped buying. But let's just say I gave them substitutes, that I thought were pretty reasonable. They still, missed out on a few things according to them. But so as a rebel, I feel like I can sort of say with some degree of confidence that, taking small steps towards our health really is important. And that's simply because I think our society and our environment sort of sets us up to be unhealthy. And unless we fight back, unfortunately, that's the path that we're on. And so when I started getting really into this, I ended up getting a health coaching certification. That was back in 2010. I've recently gotten another one, or a few years ago. That was functional medicine coaching
wow.
because I felt like that's what sort of had helped me heal. And it wasn't just from IBD, it was from a couple of other diagnoses. And I really felt like instead of immediately taking the medicine, and I'm not saying there isn't a place for medication, but I did want to always try to do some holistic measures on, my own before I took medications, which most of the time were going to be for life. So I feel like I represent a balance, a balanced approach. But I ended up getting a couple of certifications, and then I started doing some work in my community and on the health front. And then I did some health coaching. And what I kept hearing from all the places I was interacting with people was that they felt like the choices were where they are now, and then something super extreme that was really far away from where they were now. And
Right.
sometimes, that is a possible leap to make, especially if you're reeling from hearing bad news at the doctor's office or something like that. Sometimes going from A to Z really does work. But a lot of the time, what I was seeing was that people would, change their lifestyle pretty significantly, and then not be able to sustain that right away, and then fall back to whatever they had been doing and sort of saying like, this X or Y thing didn't work for me. And so I would notice the same thing in books I was reading and so on. Like I remember reading a book where it was like, yeah, yoga's fine, and if you start with gentle yoga, you can eventually get to power yoga. And I just wanted to write, like scream back at the author, like, gentle yoga's great. Like you don't need to we don't all need to do power yoga. Like we all don't, you know what I mean? And the same thing was true with, couch to 5K kind of things. It's like running's great. If you enjoy running, if your body enjoys running, go for it, but my message was walking is also great. And the same, so wellness while walking was born from the frustration that I felt when I felt like people thought there were two paths, the one they were on, and the one that was significantly different. And there's
either the one they're on or Mount Everest.
yeah. And sometimes, like I said, sometimes we get there, but other times there are things that we can do that have so much impact on our health and well-being that aren't quite so extreme.
Well,
And
and
so
humans always want to have a huge, like, to be epic. I don't know why we always want to be epic. I'm gonna go do Vikings charging off into, I don't know. I'm like, why can't we just get there a little bit at a time?
yeah, I
Like,
so agree. I so agree. And maybe we can be epic in some things, you know what I mean? Like, but do we have to be that way for everything? And I think there's room for kind of balancing the things out.
well, and I think that it's like our culture these days really glamorizes the hugeness of things, like all the TV shows. I didn't sleep all night because XYZ, I had to save the world. So it becomes somehow sexy to do everything to the extreme.
I totally agree. And it's
It's
something
not
that
real.
no, and it's not usually sustainable. And there's so much beauty in the smaller things and the simpler things. I think as I get older, I know I have gravitated towards understanding that I feel like I'm much more comfortable, kind of taking things slow and maybe not necessarily having to experience the pinnacle of everything all the time. And I think, I watch young people today. I have a bunch of them that, came from my household. And there's a lot of pretty, like they all have to get that really, really big kind of adrenaline slash dopamine hit for a lot of different aspects of their lives. And I do worry a little bit about that.
Have you read the book 24/6?
No,
Oh,
that
you should
sounds
totally
fabulous.
check it out. And right now, the author's name has escaped me, and I
That's okay.
apologize to the author in advance. But 24/6, I read a couple years ago, and it talks a lot about the speed that society keeps revving up to. And it talks about children and how getting onto digital media early when their brains aren't developed enough to discern um, or able to say no, that it really can impact their development. And it it advocates taking 24 hours a day off of all
Mm,
screens.
so yeah.
And when I read it, I said to my husband, I said, "Hey, do you want to try this?" He said, "No." And then I had him read the book, and then he said, "Yes."
Wow.
So there is when I first did it, I was going, "Oh my God, what do I do? Oh my God, what do I do?" But then I realized, because I'm old enough to remember the time before, the time before, the time before,
Mhm.
I suddenly realized how much I used to get done on a weekend. And not like I had a huge long to-do list. I wasn't this person who's like, go, 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 go. But I had the space somehow to do things that I wanted to do
Mm.
because I didn't feel the need to always be connected 24 hours a day. I still remember when you had to wait for somebody to phone you. Oh my God. So So I think it'll be interesting to see what happens with people who grew up in that digital
Mhm.
age who don't know the time before.
Mhm.
How, because there's so much anxiety around, there's so much stress. I keep hearing stats about, teen suicides and um, everybody's on meds. And I'm thinking, well, the body knows how to heal itself if you let it.
Mhm.
So your comment about medication, like your body knows what to do if it can get the right environment. And sometimes we don't know what's in our food. We think we're eating healthy. Like you said, like I would love to hear what your mom said about you having to admit that she was right. Oops.
No. I did, kinda go back with my tail between my legs, yeah.
Right?
But you're right, and the time before, even for us, I think, like, many, many of us are addicted to our digital devices, and so imagine having grown up with them from such a young age. It's I do also, share your concern, but that's a fabulous strategy because I've done digital detoxes. They're challenging for sure, but then I really didn't come back and change my behavior, but doing it, more like 1 day a week
Yeah.
is, I think, a great idea.
And it's only 24 hours.
Mhm.
You can charge back in there and check all your emails afterwards. But once you do it a few times, you actually look forward to it
Mm.
because you have time to think. There's another, I read a lot, you're going to find out. So there's another book I read that was Be More, Do Less,
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
right? And it's,
Uh-huh.
you need that time, you need that unstructured time to let your brain make pathways and
Mhm.
ideas and creativity. And we don't give it a lot of that anymore.
No, you are.
Everything's scheduled.
Yes. And I'm among those, needing to take a different path. It's very challenging, I think, in our society, and there's so much to do, and there's so much we want to do. It's not all obligations. It's like there's so many things, but sometimes.
We have an
Yeah.
abundance and
Yeah,
it's a little overwhelming. So
exactly.
do you listen to in your wellness while walking? Obviously, I mean, it's your podcast, but I'm assuming you walk. I shouldn't
Mhm.
assume you
Yep.
walk, right?
Do, yes.
Do you listen to things while you're walking, or do you let your brain relax?
I really vary it. I vary it a lot. I try to do it sort of as a regular kind of rotation, but oftentimes it just doesn't work that way. But I think there's incredible value to doing all kinds of walks, walking with a friend. A lot of people during the pandemic would share that they walked with somebody remotely. They spoke to them, the same person, every week on the phone. I've heard of brothers doing this, who
Wow.
are nearby, but like most of the people I speak with are women, who have this kind of date where they walk and talk to somebody. But walking, actually with somebody is fabulous. One thing I've really loved about since the pandemic was seeing more couples walking and seeing bigger groups, like sometimes 2 couples. Like, I think before the pandemic, I would have felt weird sort of calling up our friends and saying, "Do you guys wanna go for a walk?"
Right.
And now that's all changed, so I love that. So I think there's value to having, occasional walks with people. I think there's value in walking, like you said, completely, quietly without any input, maybe with no sort of motivation or anything that you're looking for. I also think there's value in looking for certain things. I like um, what we call awe walks, AWE. Very hard word to say for a short word.
All
Um,
walks.
awe walks, and looking for things to be, in awe of, to find wonder in the world, because when you're looking for something, oftentimes you find it. Sometimes,
Right.
you can do a photo walk where you're looking to kind of catalog your walk and remember it in some way. I mean, there are, meditative walks. There are all kinds of things that we can do. So I will sometimes listen to a book or a podcast, and other times it's my walk is for something else altogether.
Do you plan it out in advance?
Well, like I said, I tried to do that for a while and it didn't go that well because sometimes, like, the like somebody I was planning to walk with couldn't walk, and then I'm
Right.
like, do I try to sub somebody else in,
Right.
or am I
I
just
need a
gonna
sub.
exactly. So, but no, I usually don't. But I like the idea of having a checklist, which I've made up, a checklist of different kinds of walks, so
That's
that
so
people,
cool.
yeah, like they're different, like um, sometimes it's healthy to walk in a very different terrain for your body than you usually walk. And so sometimes it's something like that, where you're just like, let's change it up. Like if you're always walking on the pavement, like maybe let's try to find, somewhere where there's, like a forest with like a kind of a, floor of wood chips, let's say,
Right.
or a beach where there's sand, there as a physiological exercise as well as, kind of expanding our mental health and well-being. But mostly I just kind of, yeah, just like
I love
sit side.
checklists. Such a
Me too.
checklist.
I think it's hard to remember options sometimes in our lives. And so I think like a checklist is really helpful. And then there's so much research about the value of checklists and just making sure that we're doing what we really intended to in life.
Well,
Like,
and habit trackers, like all of
mhm.
I love that stuff.
Me too.
Um, have you heard I had this video for a little while on one of my websites. This was a number of years ago called 23 and a half hours.
Mm-mm.
It was by a doctor. It was like one of those whiteboard videos. And basically, it was saying you can do whatever you want the 23 and a half hours a day, but half an hour a day, move your body.
That's such
So
a
it was trying to make a point. Like people say they don't have time to move or do things. It's like you have 23 and a half hours to do whatever you want. Just move for half an
Mhm.
hour,
Right.
please.
Yes.
And
And
it
that
was talking about the health benefits
and moving is sorry.
that's okay.
I might
That's
bring him on
okay.
screen just because then I don't have to worry about him barking. Come here. Um, I love the movement approach because that's another thing that I found that people, they felt bad about if they didn't quote unquote exercise. And believe
Right,
me, like walking, when I started doing this, I don't think many people considered walking exercise. Thankfully, there's been so much research and press about the benefits that I do think people think of it now as exercise. But when you talk about moving your body, I think you just harken back to how we were designed, which was to move. And so even those who exercise in a stint, whether that be 3 times a week or 5 times a week or 7 times a week, if they're still sedentary or, as I like to say, stationary, because even standing still in one place, it's better
yes, but
than
it's
sitting,
still not
but
moving.
it's still not moving. And so if we're stationary, the other 23 and a half hours a day, the same, it's just not as optimal. So almost, if I've had many experts on my show about movement, about exercise and walking in particular, and, the research isn't quite there, but the feeling among these experts who this is their living, and they're like one in particular, Dr. Marie Murphy, who's like kind of written all the exercise standards for much of Europe. I mean, her feeling is like, if I had to choose between 30 minutes of movement and 10 minutes 3 times a day of movement, she's like, it's looking like 10 minutes 3 times a day might even be better. So even if we, feel like, oh, even with that, the way the physician stated it with 23 and a half hours, like 30 minutes, it doesn't even have to be all at once, it
Right,
can be broken up. And I think that it doesn't also have to be what we would consider an exercise, you know what I mean? Like going up and down the stairs and doing laundry and gardening and, kind of just doing the stuff of life, if we're physical, is incredibly beneficial. And there have been recent studies about different groups of people who move their bodies for a living. And just when they understand how healthful it is, then they can actually avail themselves of all the benefits. It's actually not paying attention and not understanding that that counts
right.
means that you don't actually get all the benefits, believe it or not, which is a crazy thing that our mind does. Like,
Yeah,
so we have to acknowledge that we're moving and that, like, so it's good if we've set, if we've been moving around in our house, let's say like I'm packing up for a move. So all those flights up and down the stairs, like if I acknowledge them, then I reap the benefits of them. So it's kind of it's definitely, there's so much evolving in our understanding of the body and the mind, but to me, it's fascinating. So I just urge people to not get caught up in the preconceived notions about sweating or about, going to a gym, or I'm all in favor of all these things. I love sweating, by the way, which as a kid I hated. But I just think people can think outside the box, and just moving the body is really what we were meant to. And obviously, our hunter-gatherer forefathers weren't going to bar class. It's great, but that's
But
not the only way.
no, and it's true. Like I remember way back when I first started, I was like in my 20s when I started formally exercising. And it was like exercise had to be somewhere you went and something you did and et cetera, et cetera. But now, like I actually have a habit tracker and all it says is move. So every day I just need to move. What's your puppy's name?
Oh, this is Kobe.
Hi, Kobe.
He's a different kind of walk. He's a very slow walk, which is also really beneficial too. Like there's, one of my earlier episodes I called like the art of moseying or something like that. Moseying really also has benefits. So even
It totally does.
even a slow dog walk is walking movement.
Yeah, absolutely. I had something in my head. Something about oh yes, there was a research study done. I think it was Canadian doctors who did it that talked about, even if you go to the gym and you work out for an hour every day, but you go and then sit at a desk for the rest of your day, you're still at an increased risk for cardiovascular
It's crazy.
because of your, I would say that's sedentary because you're sitting at a desk. So I think it's like you exercise, which is good for you, but then your blood isn't circulating because you're sitting still. So you get that increased
right. You still need to move.
illness.
Yeah. And I've heard some really interesting ways that some companies and organizations are helping people realize that. So one interesting way that worked was not putting trash cans in people's individual offices. So they actually had to get up to throw stuff out. And they found that just increased movement a little bit and, ended up being beneficial. So there are creative ways, but if no one's doing that for us,
right. You got to do it for yourself. And so many people working from home now, I think it's worse because they don't even have to get up to go to work.
That also has been proven that there are a lot of benefits to not commuting, but one is that we tend to move less. And so we do have to add that back in. And even though it seems like found time that we're not on a train or in our car, we probably need to take back a little of that time. And
well, we always fill the space. So maybe it's found time. So maybe with that found time, you go for a walk.
Exactly.
Now, I saw something where you made a comment about walk against traffic. Tell me what that is.
So that alludes to what I mentioned before, and it is worse, probably a little bit more of an issue here in the US. Even our close neighbors, Canada, are faring so much better in this realm than we are, and I think of us as so similar. But here in the US, we really have to fight against the natural forces that exist in our current environment that keep us sort of unhealthy. So even though I'm a firm believer in not taking the extreme approach, I do feel like we have to take an approach, because if not, we'll be sort of swept away by these unhealthy forces. And it's everything from kind of the digital situation that I was talking about, to kind of the hustle culture, to the fact that many of us do have desk jobs and aren't encouraged to exercise at lunchtime, even forget getting up a lot during the day. All these things, and in the US in particular, are very heavy reliance on ultra processed food. So that is unfortunately something that we're exporting worldwide these days. But my feeling is that if we just kind of go with the flow, unfortunately, there's a really high chance that we will be unhealthy. And I don't look at health as kind of a scorecard. It's our ability to do the things that we imagined for our lives. And oftentimes, increasingly so, unfortunately, here in the US, while sometimes we might be living longer, actually that statistic is sadly turning around and we're not living longer. But more than that, our health span, how healthy we are during the time that we're living, is shrinking as well. So a lot of those years that we're still alive, we're not feeling that great, and we're not living that life that we had dreamed of. So I'd say walk against traffic because first of all, we should walk against traffic, and it really scares me. That's literally, when I see
Elmer the
people.
safety elephant.
Yeah. See, we don't have who's Elmer the safety elephant?
That was when we were little kids.
No,
And
I didn't.
this might be just I don't know if they still teach it because Elmer the safety elephant said, "Always walk facing oncoming traffic."
Oh,
That was one of
I'm
his
writing this
rules.
down. Elmer was
And
right.
Elmer the safety he had a lot of rules, and I remember him. He was a very happy elephant, but he always wanted you to be safe. Cross only when the light's green, and we used the crossing guard, and it was all this teaching kids look right and left, and
That's so funny. I'm gonna have to look
Elmer
Elmer
the
up
safety
and
elephant,
and maybe bring him onto my Instagram
right?
feed. So yeah, so I that's my feeling is that, we should walk against traffic so we see oncoming traffic and unfortunately can leap out of the way because pedestrian safety is at an all-time low. Um, but really figuratively is how I intended it, which is that even though, like I say, you don't have to do the extreme, we do have to have a little bit more of a leadership role in our health than I think most people really understand. We go to the doctor once a year and so on, whatever the case may be. But unfortunately, there are a lot of things that we need to take charge of that it would be so nice if someone swooped in and took charge for us. But we haven't gotten ourselves into this situation, but we're really the only ones who can sort of fight against these kind of, unhealthy trends. So
One
that's
of the
what I
things
mean.
yeah, it's like one of the things I always, ask my clients to do is take responsibility for their decisions.
Yeah.
So, by not, doing anything about your health, that's a decision. It's like you didn't decide not decided, you decided to do something, and I find it interesting that, I didn't know that our, age was dropping, lifespan was dropping, but I do believe that the quality of the later years has been
Mhm.
dropping
Mhm.
just from observation,
Yeah.
which I find very disheartening because we know so much.
Mhm.
And I have this conversation with my husband. We know what to do: move less or move more and eat better. That's all we ask. It's very simple, but it's simple but complicated,
Right. I think
right?
yeah, and in addition, there are other things that I think used to be more kind of set up in our society, even sort of the, reduction in religious, services and going to church and going to synagogue or what have you. When we reduce those things, we're naturally less involved in a community. And a
Right.
lot of times we're not making up for that. And so I think there were other aspects of our lives that were sort of healthy that we didn't really understand were driving health. But, and even like, it's so great that we have all these appliances, but, even moving more to just kind of get the daily stuff of life
Hang
done.
up the laundry,
Yeah. I mean, it all was right, like
right?
bending, like flexing, carrying something heavy. And so I think that now more than ever, yeah, we just have to pay a little bit more attention. It can be fun. It doesn't have to be a task. This walking against traffic. It should be fun. Because it feels good to feel good. It feels
Yeah.
good to feel better, and you'll feel so much better almost immediately if we attend to these basics. But the sad truth is that we do have to attend to the basics.
And I don't know if you have maybe I get the sense that you probably do. So there's some neighborhoods here that they created that don't have sidewalks.
Mhm.
And I can remember at one point when I was moving to a neighborhood and I was like, I can't move somewhere that doesn't have sidewalks.
Good
I
for
mean,
you.
because one of my requirements to my real estate agent was I needed to be able to walk to the grocery store. I wanted to be able to walk to the pub. Okay, yes, I wanted to walk to the
It's
pub.
all good.
And I wanted
Talk
to
about
be able to
community, yeah.
right, and walk to the coffee shop. And and when you get into the suburbs, they often are designed around a car.
Yeah,
So you walk out your house, you get into your car, you drive somewhere, you get out of your car. It's like, no, I want to be able to walk
yeah.
places. So now every time I move, I was like, where's the sidewalks and where's the grocery store?
Good for
You know?
you. I don't think I certainly never thought about it. I thought maybe not having sidewalks meant the roads were so quiet that it was safe to walk. Well, now I'm on my third, long-term home, including my childhood home, where I couldn't really walk anywhere because there were no sidewalks. I mean, I've only lived in places with sidewalks a handful of years of my life. But like I mentioned earlier, I'm moving, and that was one of the big factors was I want to be able to walk more safely. I think it is a little dangerous being a pedestrian these days because there's so much inattention. And so
Cell
I
phones, rushing, all of that.
Mhm. There's a lot of road rage and other crazy stuff. So I want those sidewalks, and that's, we're moving to, and we will be able to walk more. And there are now on real estate listings in the US anyway, available. You can get a walking index. So it would still be challenging for me from where we're going to move to, get a lot of groceries and walk home, but it's certainly possible. Whereas now it's not really possible. So
Right.
um, I give you a lot of credit. And I guess just, if people are listening and they do live in a place without sidewalks, then, I do think it's valuable to walk, to, drive or take a train or something to somewhere occasionally where there are sidewalks, because it just feels different, paths and quieter roads are great. But
And
so is,
parks and
yeah.
it's all so many good walking places. But during the pandemic, my husband, we were the couples walking, holding hands.
Aw.
Every day we would walk 5K
Wow.
because everything was shut down. We said, well, let's go for a walk. So every single day we went for a walk. And we would say, which direction are we going today?
That's so
We
great.
explored a lot of the neighborhood.
And I've seen people who've started documenting different things, like because they've started walking more during the pandemic, and they really are making an effort to see like all the areas that they can walk to. And it's really fun to watch. I don't have that many options right now, but I will.
You will. You will. Now, you have online group, some online group program. Is that
Yep.
what is that?
So we are kicking off our first online group health coaching program. I've worked one-on-one with people for many years, and I've worked in groups, but in person, and now we're combining the two. So by the time this airs, the first round will have happened, but we'll be taking names for the waitlist for the second round. And it's a 10-week program, which includes both one-on-one coaching and group coaching. And again, I feel like community is so important, and I have found it so important when I've been trying to change my behavior. And so I'm really excited to reintroduce that aspect of my coaching, because I haven't done it in a few years with a group of people, because they become experts or they have their own ideas and they help each other. And it's one of the best feelings I've had as a coach, is to watch people come into their own, appreciate the things they're doing, even while they're working on other things, and be able to share those and encourage others on their journey.
And I mean, we talked right before we came on about habits, and we've kind of been talking about them the whole time,
A
just
little
not
bit, yeah.
specifically. But I found, because I used to belong to a running group, if I didn't feel like running, but I knew that even one person in the running group was expecting me,
Mhm.
I just took myself there. So that's part of the benefit of having a walking buddy or a group
Yep.
or any of those things. And I know, because I instruct kayaking as well, as people will say to me, well, I don't have anybody to kayak with. I said, well, reach out to the kayaking community. I mean, they're all looking for people to paddle with. So, you can find a friend to go kayaking with, because it's more, well, we tell people not to kayak alone just for
Mm,
safety,
right.
but um, also it's more fun when you have somebody to talk to.
Yeah, and then on those days, like you said, where you're sort of like giving yourself an out, if somebody's really waiting for you and reliant for their time out on the water, waiting for you. So, you're much more likely to do it. I think
Yeah,
accountability is really, really helpful.
right.
I
Yeah.
I know I use it myself.
Oh, yes, I totally use it. I'm in mastermind groups. I have more than one coach for myself
Yep.
to
Same.
I mean, I'm really good at being responsible for myself, but sometimes I just need a little extra help.
I
And
think, we have a lot of options available to us to spend our time. So if we're really trying to get something done, it's really easy to lose sight of that. And so accountability, I think, is one key way to keep,
right.
our values and goals kind of at the forefront.
And walking pretty much now, I know that there's some people it's not something available to them, but walking is something almost everybody can do,
Right.
right?
There are people for whom it's not an option. There are people for whom it's not an option for a variety of reasons, unfortunately. Some people, it's not safe in their neighborhood for whatever reason. You know, marching in place or walking or doing kind of like those little, kind of sort of steps that we might have done in the 80s for
I've still
for
got one.
aerobics. Yeah. Like those kinds of things, even without the step, but just doing, kind of like those same moves, which are plentiful and easy to find on YouTube. That's an option to do inside. But like I said, it's really about moving. So when I say wellness while walking, there's, it's more just like wellness while sort of doing whatever you need to
Yeah.
do to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
But yeah, for sure, walking is great, but it's not available to everyone. And there are all kinds of ways, luckily, that we have to move our bodies.
Go on YouTube and check out the fitness marshal.
Oh yeah,
Oh my God, he kills me.
Dancing is a fabulous, fabulous activity. There's many, many benefits to moving in concert with others that you don't get necessarily in other ways. But I love it. That's so fun, and you're not paying attention to the clock. That thing is over before you know it, right?
I know. I love him. He makes me laugh no matter what, no matter what mood I'm in. Sometimes I don't even dance. I just turn him on to watch him.
Funny.
He's so funny.
It's so true. And humor, there's another thing. Well, if you said two things that just, kind of spring to mind, make me think of other wellness aspects that sometimes people don't think about. One is taking the initiative and reaching out to somebody to do something like it. A lot of times we assume that people aren't interested or, they're so busy or what have you, but asking somebody in your neighborhood to walk with you, it's such a compliment. And I would think most people would be very open to that. So asking is one thing, but also humor. I mean, humor makes everything just so much better. So
Right.
finding humor in the things that we're, working on, I think is just it's a wonderful strength to draw on.
Yes, definitely. That's why they invented laughter yoga.
It's
And it's an ab workout too.
so awesome.
So
So
now if they
wonderful.
want to find your group program I'm just looking down at my notes, wellnesswhilewalking.com.
Correct.
Is
That's
it
the
all one word?
website.
All like
Yep. Mhm.
okay.
No little weird dashes or
No
anything.
doubts, right? And it'll be in the show notes for the people who are like, I don't have a piece of paper. Don't
Yes,
worry.
no
It's in the show
worries.
notes. I will put it in there so that they can find you.
Thank you.
And yeah, definitely walking, my friends. Oh my gosh, seriously. It's so easy. It's such an easy way to stay healthy, right?
It is, and the research really is there now and how important it is, and really it made us actually human. That's what
Right.
distinguished us from
We're
in
not asking you to cut out
evolution.
chocolate or anything. We're just asking you to go for a walk. Like, put it in
Exactly.
perspective.
Yeah. It's really, really wonderful, and I think most people immediately fall in love with it.
Awesome. Now, I always am interested before we go, if you have, we've had many words of wisdom, but do you want to have a parting word of wisdom for everyone?
Sure. Thank you so much for this
Mhm.
opportunity. First of all, I've really enjoyed getting to know you, and your show is fabulous. So thank you for
Thanks.
including me. I would just say, listening to our wisdom, our inner wisdom, our knowledge of ourselves, and finding what is the right thing for us, because there are so many people shouting at us, do this, do that, eat this way, move that way, live your life this way. And I would just say tuning into our inner wisdom and seeing what's right for us, because there is really no one right path.
Right. Yes, we are all an experiment of one.
I love that. Yep.
That's awesome. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Carolyn. Such good information. And yeah, we are totally on the same page. We are both wellness while we live our lives, right?
Exactly.
So
All
thank you so
positive.
much for joining me. Thank you so much. Friends in podcast land, send this to your friends and then invite them out for a walk.
Love it.
Take care. See you soon.
Thanks.